In terms of the restorative justice regime in the country and the outcomes that we are seeing, what, in your view, needs to be improved?
It needs to be?
Improved.
Oh, well, that's what the colloquium was about today. There are quite several things that needs to be. But I'll just pick up a few. But to go through the whole list, it's a problem. Or it won't be possible, or won't finish now. But one of the problems that we have picked up is the people who conduct restorative justice, the training. As you'd know, where offenses such as rape, domestic violence, is very important who conduct such a restorative justice process. So, for example, if it's rape, you need to get someone who would be sensitive to the subject. Yeah. If it's a woman, you need to get a woman. If it's at times you find that a man is coming to report to a police station that he has been assaulted by his wife, the reaction that you get there is very different if you have, depending on who you have. If you report to a man, the reaction might be a laughter, because it's very unusual that someone is being assaulted by his wife. But this just somewhat a taboo to hear that a wife has assaulted the husband. So there are numerous other such examples. Another problem might be, let me see, okay, how, for example, do you deal with people who over time remain hurting? We say time heals, but it's not necessarily true of everyone. People still grieve well after years of the happening.
Right.
So, there is room for improvement all over.
Let's just take that last one, Judge. I mean, there is a sense, for example, in one of the high-profile cases of the Hani family, where when Janus Walus was granted parole, the family really felt aggrieved in a sense that the victim-offender dialogue was not adequate. They felt that them as the family and as victims were not given a hearing. For example, on questions of taking accountability on the part of the offender, to tell them the truth and reveal who else was involved and really come clean. And they're saying until that particular process happens, they are not going to heal. How do we improve that kind of situation?
Well, it's a very difficult subject, and one that I didn't really reflect on. It's quite difficult. I wouldn't necessarily want to go there because that's a very sensitive case. Generally, yes, you do have many such cases where it will always evoke certain emotions. And this one was a very, as you know, very prominent case. So, I prefer not to discuss a particular case, but generally, I can only say there may be room of improvement.
How would we identify areas, I mean, that would be areas of support for the victims, in maybe not in that specific case, but in general terms, where families feel it's not yet time. I mean, you could look at the Oscar Pistorius matter as well, where the also family felt it feels it's not yet time, and they need to be supported in a sense as well as they're going through this period.
Well, remember, restorative justice is supposed to be victim-focused. But unfortunately, not unfortunately, but by the way things are, you cannot just turn the spotlight on the victim only, because there's almost also the offender who may be a victim of circumstances, finding himself, the social background might have led to him committing that crime. So in a sense, he's also a victim. I think you need a system that takes both sides, but with a more emphasis on the victim, because at the moment, let me put it this way. We had a speaker today who said, look, when a case is in the courts, the offender, or rather the accused, has all legal representation, and everything is in his favor. Until he's convicted, he goes through the system, he receives, he goes through programs, social worker programs, psychologist programs, he has legal representation, until when restorative justice comes in. At that point, you call in the victim to participate. And the victim will not be on an equal platform as the offender, because she or he would not have legal representation, would not have gone through the same programs as the offender. So one needs to beef up that side, such that you level the field. And that's one of the things that came up today.
Yeah.
But you probably you'll need probably a change in policy. There might also be a need to change the Act involved, Correctional Services Act, to accommodate some of the things that I'm talking about.
Right. One of the areas that is also under discussions are protocols for ethical implementation of the policy, as you mentioned, and the legislation when it comes to parole and restorative justice approaches. One of the things that society broadly has a view on, and maybe others not so much, but is the question of the abuse of the medical parole protocols, right, where somebody would be released on medical parole, and then they end up going to have a nice life, playing a round of golf and living in comfort. And people looking at that and saying, this is an unethical use of this policy and legislation. How do we tighten that?
But you see, we don't get involved in that. That's a specific area, medical parole, as you say, but the NCCS does not get involved in medical paroles. So ours is specifically, we consider parole for what we call lifers, people who have been convicted for life.
Right.
Or for life. Yeah. So I wouldn't like to venture into medical paroles. That is regulated. The people who sit on that, the professionals, medical professionals, I think, sit on that board.
Right.
So the body that I chair is very different from that.
So in your space where you're dealing with lifers, it's very rare that you would get a dispensation where one is released because of medical reasons.
Well, you do have people with medical conditions, but not necessarily that you release them on that basis. But that could be one matter that you consider. For example, I mean, I'm just trying to think of a person is, say, chronic sugar diabetes, and he's old. There would be no use keeping such a person but will not be releasing him on the basis of medical parole, because that's something else. But we could consider that this person has chronic sugar diabetes, and in any event, he qualifies for consideration. Let's see whether we can place him.
Right.
But it's not medical parole. But we do consider one medical condition when we place a person.
Now, in terms of the approaches, for example, that you take, you mentioned earlier on that we need to get to a point where victims are participating, for example, in the decision-making phase. At this particular point, do you think society is being left behind, especially the poor and the vulnerable, when it comes to understanding these guidelines and protocols and what informs some of the decisions that you're making?
Well, not necessarily, but a lot of public education is required to make sure that the public or victims know what their rights are insofar as restorative justice is concerned. So, that's one of the outcomes of today, that maybe we have to be a bit vigorous with our marketing to teach the public in case they get involved in this unfortunate situation where they're involved in crime, that once they find themselves in that, they should know what to do.
Now, as the council, I mean, of course, you're going to get various views from this colloquium, and it shouldn't end as just a talk shop. But what is the next step? What do you take this information and what do you do with it?
Well, we hope, as I say, one of the things that we have identified quite a number of problems, and I think that will be put together and distributed to stakeholders, in particular people who the facilitators. They should know what to do when they conduct or when they're involved in restorative justice processes. That's the idea, because it's only through those facilitators that will get this message out there.
Chairperson, appreciate your time. Thank you very much for coming on. That's the chairperson for the National Council of Correctional Services, Judge Brian Mashile.